About 4.5 billion years ago, before life existed, before even the concept of time made sense to any conscious being, planet Earth was born wrapped in violence, fire, and chaos. The story of our world didn't begin with the gentleness of a peaceful morning, but with cosmic explosions, titanic collisions, and temperatures that melted even the most resistant elements. To understand who we are, we must first understand where we came from. And our story didn't begin on Earth, but in the stars. In the vast depths of the cosmos, a supernova, the violent death of a giant star, released an enormous amount of dust and gas in a region of space we now know as the Orion arm of the Milky Way. This swirl of stellar matter, rich in elements like carbon, oxygen, iron, and silicon, began to contract under its own gravity. Thus was born a giant molecular cloud, ground zero of our solar system. Under the pressure and collapse of that cloud, a central mass became increasingly dense and hot until it exploded in nuclear reactions. Thus our sun was born. Around it, the remnants of that stellar birth began to orbit, colliding, merging, aggregating. Among those incandescent fragments, a rocky planet began to take shape, primitive Earth. But what emerged at that stage was not yet a habitable world. Proto-Earth was a burning hell. Bombarded by asteroids, meteorites, and planetary bodies, its surface was an ocean of magma. The initial atmosphere, if it can be called that, was composed of hydrogen, helium, carbon dioxide, ammonia, and methane, forming a toxic mixture that no current organism could breathe. It was in that scenario that one of the most catastrophic and decisive events in the planet's history occurred: the impact of a Mars-sized object known as Theia. This collision, which occurred approximately 100 million years after Earth's birth, was so brutal that it launched millions of tons of molten material into space. Part of that material was reincorporated into the planet. The rest joined together in orbit, and over time, formed our moon. The creation of the moon was much more than a geological accident. Since then, this natural satellite has been fundamental to our planet's stability. It regulates the tides, maintains Earth's rotational axis stable, and unknowingly laid the foundation for future conditions for life. After the Great Impact, Earth needed millions of years to stabilize. The surface continued molten for geological centuries, but gradually began to cool. A solid crust formed, though brittle, and enormous amounts of water vapor were released that, upon condensing, fell as incessant rain for millions of years. Thus the first basins were filled. Thus the first oceans were born. Imagine that primordial world, a sky covered with black clouds, constant acid rain, endless lightning, and a raging sea covering most of the planet. There were no continents. There was no free oxygen. Only water, rock, and a thick atmosphere of lethal gases. And yet, in that primordial soup, the most improbable miracle in the universe was gestating: life. We don't know exactly how it happened. Theories abound. Some scientists believe life arose in hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor, where heat and minerals allowed the synthesis of the first complex organic molecules. Others suggest the ingredients came from space, in comets or meteorites rich in prebiotic compounds. Perhaps it was a combination of both. What is certain is that approximately 3,800 million years ago, the first unicellular life forms appeared, simple organisms called prokaryotes, similar to current bacteria. These tiny creatures didn't need oxygen. They fed on chemical compounds from the environment and reproduced by dividing. For billions of years, Earth was theirs and theirs alone. These microorganisms inhabited a hostile planet. There was no ozone layer to protect them from ultraviolet radiation. Continents didn't yet exist as we know them. And yet, they adapted, evolved, and began to change the world irreversibly. One of the greatest changes occurred when some of these beings developed an extraordinary capability: photosynthesis. Cyanobacteria, about 2.5 billion years ago, began using sunlight to transform carbon dioxide and water into energy, and as a byproduct, they released oxygen. At first, this oxygen reacted with iron dissolved in the oceans, creating oxide formations that today constitute some of the planet's oldest rocks. But over time, oxygen began to accumulate in the atmosphere. This process, known as the Great Oxidation, was a turning point. For many anaerobic species, oxygen was poisonous. Many died. But others evolved, adapted, and gave rise to more complex life forms. As the atmosphere transformed, so did Earth. The planet was no longer just rock and water. It was a living, changing organism, in which geology and biology began to intertwine inseparably. At the same time, in Earth's depths, tectonic plates began to move. The Earth's crust fragmented into giant plates that, floating on the semi-liquid mantle, began to collide, separate, and slide against each other. Thus arose the first proto-continents. These tectonic movements generated volcanoes, mountain ranges, and deep oceans. And with each collision or rupture, Earth's surface was reconfigured. Nothing was permanent. Everything was in process. Continents were born, died, and recomposed. One of the first known supercontinents was Kennerland, followed by Rodinia and, later, the most famous of all, Pangaea. Each marked a stage in the planet's evolution, influencing climate, ocean currents, and, of course, life. Meanwhile, unicellular organisms began organizing into more complex structures. Eukaryotic cells emerged, with nuclei and organelles, precursors to all modern animals, plants, and fungi. It was a colossal evolutionary leap. For billions of years, life existed only in the sea. The ocean depths were evolution's first cradle. There, the first algae began releasing even more oxygen. The atmosphere became richer. The ozone layer formed. And thus, little by little, Earth stopped being hell to become a garden under construction. But this story, full of geological and biological miracles, was still in its infancy. The first complex creatures, the first animals, the first steps on dry land. All of that was yet to come. Because Earth's story is not only ancient, it's astonishingly resilient. And the best was yet to be written. Earth, after billions of years of cosmic violence, volcanic fire, and primordial seas, was ready to change protagonists. No longer would rocks, wind, or eruptions dictate the planet's rhythm. Life, timidly, began to claim its place. Approximately 600 million years ago, an evolutionary explosion changed the planet's course forever. It was the Cambrian explosion, an event in which, in a surprisingly brief period in geological terms, the first complex animals emerged. The ancestors of mollusks, arthropods, segmented worms, and the first primitive vertebrates appeared. Everything began under the sea. Creatures with exoskeletons, compound eyes, and bizarre forms dominated the oceans. The Cambrian seas were a biological carnival where each species competed to survive in a new world, without defined rules. It was the time of sea monsters, like Anomalocaris, an agile and strange predator, or the trilobite, one of the first great colonizers of the ocean floor. During the following hundreds of millions of years, evolution didn't stop. In the Devonian, about 400 million years ago, the first jawed fish, amphibians, and shortly after, the first organisms to leave the water and explore dry land appeared. Plants began growing taller. Insects multiplied. The world began to turn green. But this expansion wasn't constant. The history of life on Earth is also a history of mass extinctions. Natural cataclysms, climate changes, cosmic impacts. All of this swept away thousands of species on more than one occasion. The most devastating occurred 250 million years ago. The Permian extinction, also known as the Great Dying. 95% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial ones disappeared. It's believed to have been caused by a combination of massive volcanic eruptions, oceanic methane release, and extreme climate alterations. Earth was on the brink of becoming a dead planet. Again. But life returned. Stronger, more diverse. And from that rebirth emerged the most fascinating creatures that ever inhabited Earth. Dinosaurs. During the Mesozoic era, between 230 and 65 million years ago, dinosaurs dominated all terrestrial ecosystems. They were giants, fierce, some even feathered. They walked on continents still united in Pangaea, which slowly began to fracture, forming the current continents. The seas were ruled by colossal reptiles, like ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs. The sky, by pterosaurs. And on land, beasts like Tyrannosaurus rex, Triceratops, or the agile velociraptor emerged. But dinosaurs also met their end. 65 million years ago, an asteroid over 10 kilometers in diameter impacted the Yucatan Peninsula, releasing energy 1,000 times greater than all the world's nuclear weapons combined. A global winter, caused by dust and ash blocking the sun, killed the giants. Only the small creatures, the resilient ones, those who knew how to adapt, survived. And among them were mammals. For millions of years, they lived in the shadow of dinosaurs. They were small, nocturnal, opportunistic. But after the extinction, the world was theirs. They quickly occupied the vacant niches. They evolved, grew, diversified. Primates appeared, intelligent and social creatures that would begin an evolutionary path that would lead to us. The first hominids emerged in Africa approximately 7 million years ago. They were bipedal, capable of walking upright, with more developed brains than their predecessors. Slowly, through complex evolutionary processes full of ramifications, the human lineage took shape. Among them stood out Homo habilis, the handy man, who used stone tools. Then came Homo erectus, who mastered fire, migrated out of Africa, and lived in increasingly complex communities. Later, Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthals, occupied Europe and Asia, adapting to the cold with robust bodies and surprising abilities. And finally, approximately 300,000 years ago, our species emerged, Homo sapiens. We were different. Our symbolic intelligence, our capacity to imagine, to create, to build culture, separated us from all other creatures. We painted in caves, developed language, buried our dead. And we began to build a history not only natural, but also cultural. In just a few thousand years, we went from hunting with spears to raising cities. We domesticated fire, animals, agriculture. We founded civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, China. We built temples, wrote laws, wove myths about the gods we believed responsible for everything we didn't understand. But all that progress came at a price. The same capacity that allowed us to survive also allowed us to dominate. And with it, we began to alter the planet irreversibly. From the agricultural revolution to the industrial revolution, we have transformed forests into cities, rivers into dams, and atmospheres into laboratories. We have warmed the planet, extinguished species, polluted oceans. And yet, we continue seeking answers, exploring stars, dreaming of other worlds. Today, 4.5 billion years after its birth, Earth continues spinning beneath our feet. It has survived cosmic impacts, ice ages, global eruptions, mass extinctions, and now us. And in this thin film of life that covers its surface, a single species has managed to look back, understand where it came from, and wonder where it's going. That species is us. Homo sapiens. Temporary inhabitants of an ancestral world. Guardians, or executioners, of the only known planet with life. We still don't know if we are the inevitable result of evolution or a cosmic accident. But what is certain is that our story is woven into the same rock that was once lava, in the same waters where the first microbes swam, and under the same sky that witnessed the moon's birth. This is the story of Earth. Not just of the planet, but also the story of everything that ever lived, died, changed, and dreamed under its sky. A story that hasn't ended yet, and whose next chapter depends on us. If you liked the video, we invite you to give the video a like and subscribe to see more videos like this. Comment which documentary you want to see next.